Hey, we made it again. Yes, we made it. Today is Friday. Finally Friday. I love that. You know, we've been doing this show for 2 weeks now and had an interesting episode in the middle of all this last Saturday night. Broke my arm. I've shared that with a lot of you. And I am just discovering so many new things. One of the things I was, I've been thinking about growing my hair out. If you know me, you know I got short hair. My kids always say, why do you always have the same hairstyle? Gosh, Mom, it gets old. Yeah, well, I like it. But I was growing out the sides and these wings, I can't fix my hair with one hand. These wings were just sticking out. Finally, I called up the woman, Diane, who's been doing my hair for 22 years, people, 22 years. I call and I said, Diane, I'm a desperate woman. I need some help. Can you please cut my hair? Cut these wings off. So I went in and got my hair cut this morning at 9 a.m. Now I'm feeling fresh and refreshed. So there we go. My partner today is Pete Christensen. Hi, Pete. Thanks for joining us.
It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. Let me tell you a few things before I introduce my guests. So I want you to join us on Facebook. It's so easy. Just go to Facebook and search out News Talk 870 and then like us, and you'll be able to get updates on the show and some other news as well. It's a good news source. And you can go to our website and you can live stream the radio program. That website is newstalk870.am. Again, it's just really easy these days to just Google what you're looking for and then you can find it. Our phone number today, 509-547-8726. And we want to hear from you today. You are playing a very important role in today's program, so I really do hope that you will join us. So, first of all, I want to say happy birthday to all the folks that I share this day with. That's right. Zodiac signs. We are Taurus. We are the bull. That is between April 21st and May 20th. So all of you Taurians out there, happy birthday. Here's what it says about us that will give you a little picture. Their commitment and ability to stay focused are their biggest strengths. However, they tend to have fixed opinions, and their dogged determination is also often perceived as stubbornness. Oh dear, I've heard that before. And you know what was pretty funny for me is that I was looking up some information, or I saw this on Facebook. I saw that on Facebook, let me look up this. It was, according to your zodiac sign, how long do folks in your sign hold a grudge? Because I thought it was perfect for today. Today is Forgiveness Friday. So for Taurus, it's until they die, maybe not even then. And then that made me sad because if anything, we want to talk today about why forgiveness is so good. Now, let me compare that to people that are Gemini. If you're Gemini, that's May 21 to June 20th, and they're holding grudge 30 seconds. So there's quite a deviation there. So we know that it can be an awful lot better. One other thing I want to share with you is that what I've been wanting to do on this program is to have this section that's called Call Me, which you give me your name and phone number, and that gives me permission that I can call you, and we just have a fun, random interview. Well, I haven't gotten any names and phone numbers, and I really want to do this. So go to our Facebook page and send us a personal message with just your first name and your phone number, and we'll put you in this pile that we could randomly call. All right. Don't forget, we want you to join in our conversation today about forgiveness. Let me introduce my guest. That would be a good point to start. We have Cameron Fordmeyer. Is that right, Cameron?
That's right.
And he is from Lourdes Counseling Center.
Yep.
Okay. So hopefully, Cameron, you've dealt a lot with forgiveness in many different ways, and we'll be able to hear some of those today. Okay.
Right.
Also, we have Reverend Sandy Smith. And you are from the Center for Spiritual Living, correct?
Correct.
Okay, Sandy, thank you so much. And so what should we call you? Should we call you Reverend Sandy?
Oh, you can just call me Sandy.
Okay, all right. And Sandy, when you're not at the Spiritual Center, where else are you? What else do you do?
I am a tutor for Legacy High School. I tutor kids that usually one-on-one or two-on-two And then on Wednesday, I tutor in the jail for an hour.
Okay, all right. So Sandy also has some experience with forgiveness. Let's go ahead and take a call. Let's see what that person has to say about forgiveness. Who are you? Hello? Are you there? Oh, oh no. Okay. Pete and I are just discovering this, so we'll be back. Go ahead and call us again. Whoever that caller was, we want to join in. Okay. I want to talk a little bit to start out with about why holding a grudge hurts you. And let's start with some of the physical kinds of things that can happen when you hold a grudge or you don't give forgiveness to something. What can happen to you physically?
Well, forgiveness is very similar to the effects that stress has on your body too. So there's a lot of muscle tension. You can develop high blood pressure, hypertension, stomach problems, sleep disturbances, headaches. So it mimics very similar to the degrees of stress. When you hold on to those grudges, you hold on to those things, they can do all kinds of different things to your body.
So we're not talking about just something that goes on in your brain. Boy, it's coming out.
It's a mind-body connection, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Raymond Hollowell wrote a book called The Spiritual Law, and in it he gives us an example of these two brothers that owned a lumber company. And right towards the end of the lumber company's business, one of the brothers, Bob, stole some money.
Mm-hmm.
And then the business went under,
Mm-hmm.
and the brothers didn't see each other for maybe 15 years. And so Bob was starting to feel some stomach problems, and he was having all kinds of digestive problems. He went to the doctor couldn't find anything, and finally the doctor said, is there somebody that you have an issue with? Maybe somebody you need to forgive, or somebody needs to forgive you. And so he thought he would go ahead and call his brother, and so he did. He made an appointment with his brother Tom, and they met. And so he came clean with his brother. He told him that he had stolen the money. And Tom said, I wondered what happened. And he said, it was really brave of you to come forward and tell me that. Well,
Wow.
Bob, when he went back home, discovered that he had no more problems.
No more ailments.
Right.
Okay.
So it can, in a sense, I think it kind of can eat away at you.
Yes, it does. Yes, it certainly can. All right. And so besides some of those actual physical kinds of ailments, what about some of those emotional ailments? It makes, what happens to us? What can happen to us?
It can definitely create long-term depression, anxiety, or even short-term. You're going to have your moodiness, your frustration. So it'll increase your forgetfulness, you'll have difficulty making decision, loss of sense of humor, increased irritability and frustration, all those things that you would associate with maybe somebody who's depressed. That would be a similar effect that somebody who is highly stressed or holding on to these grudges would have.
Yeah, so there's some bad stuff there. It's not, this can be some real negative effects on your body and your mind. All right.
I've heard the expression that says, when you fail to forgive somebody, it's like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Oh. So there's a two-way street there. There's multiple ways. Also, there's not forgiving ourselves for something, as well as not forgiving someone who may have harmed you, or you perceived it that way as well. Pete, why don't we take a break right here? But we've got so many ways to talk about this subject coming up, and obviously we want to give you some ideas about how you can get through this. Our phone number, 547-8726. It's Forgiveness Friday. I've got a couple of guests in the studio right now, Sandy Smith and Cameron Fordmeyer. And let's get on the same page. What is a definition, a good definition that we can all use for forgiveness?
Yeah, I think it's good to clarify, because I think some people think that forgiveness is forgetting, and that they're actually two separate things. So forgiveness is usually a conscious decision to actually let go of that resentment or that feeling of revenge to somebody that's actually harmed you. I think it's good to clarify that forgiveness doesn't mean that you actually deny the person's responsibility for how they hurt you, or that you minimize or justify the wrong. It's simply forgiving the person without excusing the act that they did.
Okay, and I think that's a perfect way to clarify that, because a lot of people will feel that I don't want to let them off the hook, but I'm still going to have my blood pressure go through the roof. So there's a way to take that in that is healthy for you. Remember our phone number. We want to add you to the conversation, 547-8726. Maybe you've had an experience where you have asked someone for their forgiveness, or maybe you have had to forgive yourself. Share those stories with us. You don't have to give your whole name. All right. What about, I might be thinking that I'm going to be able to reconnect with someone that maybe we have split apart because of a problem. Am I going to get reconciled? Am I going to get reconnected to that person? Is that a guarantee for me?
No guarantees. No guarantees on it, but I think the whole thing is, if we think about our thoughts adding to the way our lives turn out, if we have this mind-body connection, if we're spending our time on the agony of worrying about someone, then the things in our life we're going to be consumed by that worry, by that, that anger that we might have. There was a person that I talked to one time, and her husband divorced her, and I was in contact with her 20 years later, and she was still into the, he did this to me, he did that to me, I can't believe that he actually divorced me. And chances are her husband walked away from it and never thought about it again.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it could be that something happened and we want somebody to forgive us, or we want forgiveness from the other person, but the other person may be clueless that it even bothers us.
Yeah, and that's the main point of actually wanting forgiveness, is giving up that control or taking control back, either or, depending on whether you're forgiving somebody else or you're trying to actually forgive yourself. And so when it comes to reconciliation, you can't force the other person to forgive you. You can simply ask for that forgiveness. You can behave in a manner that shows that you are sorry, but that's not going to dictate or guarantee that that person's actually going to forgive you. And so it's important, when you are seeking forgiveness, that you actually state that you are sorry for what you're sorry for, but you don't use "but." You said this and you did that and I was feeling this way. It takes away from that. It's a simple message that you are sorry for what happened, and you leave it at that. You can't guarantee that you're going to get the result that you want.
How many times do you see, or how often do you see people coming in for counseling, and when you get right down to the nitty-gritty, it's about an issue of forgiveness?
Oh, most of the time I would argue, a high percentage. Yeah.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Very much so. And that goes both ways, like we said earlier, whether that's to yourself, forgiving for a decision that you made, or forgiving a wrong that was done to you.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, that's probably the root of a lot of issues, especially with anxiety and depression. Even PTSD, for example, yeah.
So how do you set people up to be able to go through that process? Because it would be one thing for you to just sit here and tell me, well, Christine, you need to do this and this and that, but I may not work through the process. How do you work through the process?
You have to be realistic about the approach on, if you are forgiving, what is the purpose? Is it to let go of these negative feelings that you've been harboring? Is it to move on with areas in your life that you are actually struggling in, whether that be professionally, romantically, whatever that is? So realistically, what's the benefit of letting this go? And on the flip side of that, what are the negative aspects that are affecting you because of this? And if you do seek that, is that going to help relieve some of those? So I think that's the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, if I do this, what is the positive? And if I don't, what is the negative, vice versa?
Mm-hmm. So you kind of work through those. Do you do any role playing so that people are actually getting prepared to have the words that they want to say, or not?
Yeah, you can. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know that when I was first involved in my own church, and there were a lot of forgiveness workshops. There's something called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tippings, and there's a whole series of workshops that go along with it. And I had an issue from my childhood that I never even realized, until I was an adult. And I had an aunt, my Aunt Muriel, and she always came to live at our house when she was down and out. And I never had time for my mom. I had these issues, that really bothered me. And so as an adult, if I knew she was going to be at a family gathering, I would never be there. And I just pushed her away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And then as she got older, she had Alzheimer's, and I went to visit her, And through this forgiveness workshop, it dawned on me that she really loved being around me when I was there. And I had shut myself off from my family, and really the person I hurt was me, because I didn't really get to be involved in some of those family occasions. And so it was just a real aha for me. And I think sometimes there are workshops like that can help you.
Yeah, workshops and individual therapy in a place to where it's actually safe and it's non-judgmental, and you can actually go through these things. And that way you can help prepare yourself for multiple possibilities. You know, you can say, here's how I'd want to address this, and then the other person could throw a curveball at you, and, you know, approach it from a negative point of that, no, I don't forgive you, or yes, and we can kind of roll through all of those different options to help better prepare somebody for when they are ready to actually go through with that.
So what if they don't? What if they're, I don't forgive you?
And that's the thing that you realistically, and that's what we would go through as well, is that is a possibility. You know, it's similar to AA when they're trying to go to everybody that they feel like they've wronged, and that's a big part, is that you're not guaranteed that somebody will forgive you, and you don't have to actually get that for your own self. It's a simple fact that you understand that you did something wrong, or something wrong was done to you, and you are giving up that power. So it doesn't guarantee that to have the benefits of actually forgiving, that you need the other person to be there for one, if they are passed away, or if they're no longer in the state, or whatever that is. So you don't actually have to have the reconciliation to have the benefits of the forgiveness.
Okay. Here's our phone number again, 509-547-8726. And we'd like to hear some of your experiences. So what if the person has passed away? Then I know a lot of people feel horribly guilty, like they didn't take care of something before someone died. They didn't ask for that forgiveness, give it, make one last interaction with that person, whatever.
You can still write a letter to the person who is the dead person. Write out your feelings as if the person were there, and just share what those feelings were and what you feel about it, you know, and that you would hope that there was forgiveness there, and vice versa. If they did something to you, you can also be saying, I know for all these good parts and things that you had. It can go both ways, is what I'm saying.
So writing a letter, that sounds like a really good idea. And the other thing is, I don't need that person actually to be there. I'm doing it for myself, kind of a cleansing process for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing, is that you are doing this for your benefit. You need to feel better and move on, and so doing it for another person, it is not genuine. You're doing it for secondary gain if you're expecting something from someone else.
Yeah. You know, a lot of times people use that being hurt as a way to define their lives. It's just the whole, it's the entourage of their life. I am this way because people have done me bad.
Yeah.
So, boy, then if I'm going to forgive all that, I've got to redefine my world.
To quit telling the story. To quit telling the story over and over and over again.
Yeah, the exact opposite of having the victim mentality. It's more of an empowering thing, that you are doing something about this rather than having something done to you.
All right. Why don't we take another break here? We have got many other ideas about forgiveness that we want to talk about. Our phone number, 509-547-8726. It's Forgiveness Friday. We're talking about forgiveness and its value to you, and how that can help your health both physically and mentally. Before we get back to that topic, let me share with you that we have some breaking news in the Tri-Cities area. We've had a house fire in the Richland area. One woman has died. The location of the house is about 2 blocks from Beaver Park there in the Richland area. So I know that more of the news outlets will be having information about that coming up today on this Friday, May 15th. All right, we're back there now talking about forgiveness. And I want to go on a much higher level, up in the clouds here, than just the one-on-one person. Let's look at cultural forgiveness. Let's think about the Holocaust. And I know there have been several stories lately about people that were involved with the Nazis. Maybe they weren't the actual button pushers, but they did the work that they were assigned. One person in particular I'm thinking about was a bookkeeper, and he kept track of the possessions that were taken away from the Jews before they were put into the various death camps. So he now is on trial, but essentially he's asking for forgiveness for the kind of role that he played in that. Although he wasn't the mastermind of it, he certainly feels that he played a role, and he wants forgiveness. He's, I think he's about 93 years old. If you have some thoughts about our whole cultural forgiveness, that phone number is 547-8726. And here we have many, many reasons to ask forgiveness as a culture. Certainly how people from Europe came on this continent and sort of pushed aside Americans that were Native Americans living here at the time. Also slaves that we brought in from another part of the world. So what about institutional kind of forgiveness? My guess?
Well, I just think that so many things happen in our world that we just have no clue why in the world they could ever possibly happen. But I think that just like you were saying, sometimes we have gone in, like we came in and we, moved the Indians out of the way. And so sometimes I think it has to do with your perspective on things. Definitely there were just atrocities in the Holocaust. But it sounds to me like this particular man, what he was doing was recording the things, the artifacts, all of the different furniture and all of the different things. And
so I guess here comes in forgiveness, but we don't forget.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to the original point that you forgive the person, but you don't forgive the act. You don't excuse what was actually done. So we're not saying that the Holocaust was okay. We're not saying Pearl Harbor was okay. We're not saying these things, but we don't judge all Japanese people by Pearl Harbor. We don't judge everybody by the actions of an agency or a group, by the individuals.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I want to hear if people have some situations in their life that they've gone through that just by telling us your story, you might be able to help somebody else. That number 547-8726. So we've learned that just because I seek forgiveness doesn't mean that I'm going to reconcile with that person, doesn't mean that they're even going to agree with me, but I am going to take the step for myself, and I can unload that, and then I don't have to carry that around with me anymore, huh?
Yeah, you don't want that baggage and the terrible things that it can do to you physically and mentally.
All right.
You should not be judged for these things that you didn't really have any full ties to, so you're being lumped in to something that you weren't a part of. I think that is the point that we're making here.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you for your call, though. I really appreciate that. What if I'm the one who needs forgiveness? That I'm going to someone else and asking them to forgive me. How best can I set that up? Sandy, you have any ideas for that?
Well, I think that sometimes we really have to say, this is a person that was really a very important person in my life, and maybe I just need to talk to them and get it straightened out to see just exactly what it is I've done, if I know indeed what it is that I've done. And all I can do is be honest and just share maybe what was going on in my life at the time. Explain about how I realized I've gained information, and that as the years have passed, perhaps my ideas have changed about a certain situation. But I think we really do need to go, and we do need to share it, because sometimes I may think that that person needs forgiveness from me, and they are thinking, what is it that you're even talking about?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
I
they've
think
already
about
moved on and made peace with it,
Yes,
and we're still
uh-huh.
holding on to it. Yeah.
A lot of families get lumped into a dysfunctional category because they just really break down as people move from children to adulthood. I guess I can use my own life as an example. Now, I have some things that happened and how people reacted to them and all really meant that people spent a lot of years being disconnected from other people in the family. And now, as you progress into, I'm at the later stages, I look back on that and I just think, wow, that seems pretty stupid. Pretty wasteful, a lot of water traveled under the bridge there, and I missed out on that. So I guess the advice for young people today is, hey, don't let that happen to you. And it's just so easy to, sometimes it feels like it's just a lot easier to hold a grudge against someone than it is to make amends, to fix it.
Or even at the time, if somebody says something and it's like, it makes your the little hairs on the back of your neck stand up, you might even say, am I hearing what you're saying right? And to re-explain it back to them, because they may not even met that. And I also think in this day and age of texting and of email, sometimes I'll get an email and I'll think, well, gee, they were pretty mean in the way they said that, but it may not even have been intended that way. That may have been the way that I take it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, you have to look at the big picture, and we're all human, we all have emotions, so if somebody says something to us or does something that's very hurtful, it's natural to want to tell that person right away or feel like you give them a piece of your mind. But you have to look at, is that actually going to improve the situation? Is it going to extend it further? Is it going to cause further issues? Looking at, like you said, you can look back in hindsight and say, oh, that's water on the bridge, what a bunch of wasted time. It's important to think of those things in the moment, and you don't want to continue that trend. You want to actually reconcile and do something in the moment, and that's important to know too, is that we have to be present, focused, but looking at long-term effects of what we're actually doing or saying.
And also, I think a really good idea is to think about, am I reacting to what happened, or am I responding? And lots of times when I'm responding, there's a different thing. I was visiting my sister at Thanksgiving one time, and I in my family, I think we come from a people who want things to be our way. And so my sister was asking me to help her, and she was telling me exactly what to do. And so then she was telling me what spoon to use, and I was thinking to myself, what difference does it make which spoon I use, And so I went back. I have a friend who's involved in Course in Miracles, and she was saying to me, I think I would have used the spoon, because what difference does it make?
Well, if we can ask ourselves those questions, so then it becomes more like a way of living. So we begin putting forgiveness in the typical way that we live and that we interact with people. Pete, why don't we take a break here? We've got some more questions. We sure want to hear some stories from you. Our phone number is 547-8726. And I'm thinking that folks might be listening about forgiveness, and they might be thinking, yeah, I'm going to see my brother this weekend, and maybe I ought to share some feelings with my brother. And that would be great. I'll tell you that just in the past month, one of my brothers died, and there were some things that, I didn't get to say. I didn't get to communicate. They're already past now. So I guess I'll need to do that in my brain. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I kind of think that people are still around us. So I'm sure I could express those things anyway, and they would benefit me, wouldn't they?
They
Very
would.
much so.
Yeah. All right, so if people are thinking about what they're going to do this weekend and they're going to run into somebody that they know, give us a little setup on how we can make some of those conversations be most useful to us. What do you think, Sandy? Got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that sometimes just talking about what were some of the things you remember from childhood that really turned out really well. I know that when I'm talking to people and we're gathered together because someone has died, I've just discovered that if you can try and think of what the good memories are and kind of bring that up to begin with, that sometimes that leads its way in to be able to discuss other things.
Okay, so think about the good first. All right, that's a good strategy. Cameron?
Yeah, I think you have to very much consider the value of the forgiveness and the importance it is in your life or your family. Is this going to have a trickle-down effect and help the family as a whole? Is this going to just affect you and that individual person? You know, and going back to what we talked about before, having a realistic approach and knowing that this may go bad, it may go good, or it may go okay. You know, and so you really have to reflect on the facts of the situation, and you may have those family members like I do who are always right, and so it doesn't matter. I'm not getting forgiveness from them, and I know ahead of time that they're right and they're going to be right. It doesn't matter if the facts are in front of them. They know better than you, and so on and so on. And so you have to take those things into consideration when you're approaching somebody or when you're asking for forgiveness or for them as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm not necessarily going to get it. That's number one, but I can still benefit by not getting it. I can still benefit in my own mind. Our phone number, 547-8726. And again, we're coming back to some physical ailments. I mean, that's the basis for this in the first place, is the physical ailments that often are caused by this issue of forgiveness that we just think is so, sometimes we just think it's too, that's too up in the clouds. I can't be thinking about that today, but it's what's causing my high blood pressure or some other kinds of, can move me towards a heart attack or a stroke. So.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, is that if you, over long term, and you don't do anything about this, that yes, they can lead to stroke, heart attack, colitis, insomnia. There can be these long-term effects that are serious health problems. And so, when you're experiencing them right off the get-go, you may have some muscle tension that leads to now you have serious problems with your neck or your back, if you're not taking care of them. So it's very important to understand, like you said, there is a mind, body, spiritual effect from this. So it's multi-layered, multiple benefits. So.
We're talking about families, and sometimes people have a real hard time forgiving their parents, or there may be certain things that their parents did when they were younger, and you can sit and complain and talk about all the things that they did, or you can say, how am I going to do things differently? Because sometimes when you get to be a parent yourself, you see some of the things, and may see some of the reasons why your parents maybe did some of the things that they did. I know in my house it was a little bit dysfunctional when it came to cleaning, and my mother would get really upset, and all of us would spend the time cleaning, and my oldest sister and I would kind of sit there, and when she wasn't looking we'd read, and my middle sister worked the whole time. And she said, as an adult with her own kids, that she was going to do things differently, and so she gave each child a task, and if the child finished it, they could do whatever they wanted to do. So there are things that you can do differently. But then also you can also say that sometimes your parents did the best they could in the situation they were in.
Yeah, that's what it has to come down to usually. I have seen a lot of people who pretty much define their full adult life based on how they were treated as a child. And they go off the rails for it. And at some point, it's kind of like you have to create some distance between that, and now you're grown up, and I guess, you got to do it a different way. You got to make your own way, but getting there sometimes is difficult. That's why I like to really encourage people to seek out counseling. I really do. I think that people who are in that profession, either from a ministry point of view or from a counseling service point of view, you've had the experience, and you can often guide people in that process.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and especially when I was growing up, it was something that you were encouraged to, suck it up, be a man, you don't talk, you don't cry about that stuff, you just move on. And that's a similar effect of actually holding on to these grudges. It's the same thing. If there's things that are bothering you, it's not unmanly to want to talk about it. It's not something that, it shouldn't be something that's frowned upon to be able to get these things off of your chest and process them. So even if you are doing well in life, counseling and working through these issues is not something that should be frowned upon or looked negative upon.
Because it can be such a healing journey when you share it with somebody else. And sometimes there are even groups about certain things that you can go to and for some particular issue that you have, and you can realize that you're not alone.
Right, yeah. What if the person that I'm forgiving doesn't change? Then what? Then what?
That's a good question, and it goes back to the control piece of that.
Yeah.
You're not going to control them. So you can only ask for that forgiveness, or you can only try to be forgiven, and you're not going to necessarily be able to dictate their response to that.
And just like there are certain people that you meet that kind of just suck the energy out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are certain things that you can do to maybe help them try and come out of it, but eventually sometimes you have to make that decision that maybe they aren't going to be on my list of top 10 people that I go around. It's hard sometimes when it's your family, but sometimes you just have to say that I'm going to find some other positive, like-minded people that I'm going to be around instead.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the empathy and the acceptance of that too, and that's what the goal would be of forgiveness, is gaining some empathy, and maybe through that you gain more of that to understand maybe why that person behaves the way they behave, or why they think the way they think. And then you're better understanding of saying, okay, that's the issue that they have, and maybe this is why, and you can make peace with that. And you can only do that if you're just going to forgive them and not try to change them.
Can you think of any resources that, or, any books or materials that might be helpful for people if they're going to jump into this idea of forgiveness, thinking about it for themselves? What are some books that are out there right now that are good on this topic?
Well, I can think of Gerald Jampolsky wrote a wonderful book called Forgiveness, the Greatest Healer of All. And it's a little book, but it has some wonderful quotes by different people and just some wonderful messages. And it also gives an example of what he went through with his wife.
Yeah, and even if you are not a big reader and you just are kind of a social media person, or you like on the internet, you can always Google those type of things and look on Amazon. So there's something tailor-made to your taste or what you're looking for.
All right, so the resources are out there. We have got one last opportunity to take a break here. We're going to do that. We're going to come back and wrap up our session today about forgiveness. So stick around. You are listening to News Talk 870, and it's Friday, May 15th. I've been talking today about forgiveness. Boy, I hope you think about this, maybe do something over the weekend, that if something's been bothering you, get it off your chest. Go ahead and seek forgiveness or give forgiveness. I want to thank my guests today. Both Cameron and Sandy added a lot to our conversation, and thank you very much. And I want you two to have a great weekend, won't you?
Thank you. You do the
Yeah.
same.
You too. Thanks for having us.
I'm going to work on it.